Great. I want to welcome everybody for coming out tonight. It's on a very chilly night to be part of the Red Cross Emergency Preparedness Training session that we have today. Great timing considering we just went through a storm just a couple of days ago here in Connecticut, where we got spared a little bit in the Monroe Newtown area, but the state did hit some bad spots down in the southeastern corner. So this is some good learnings that we're going to learn tonight that hopefully everyone can learn, not just for the snow time, but during the summer too, just understand some of the issues that we potentially can run into and some of the solutions that we can find to hopefully help us be better prepared. Tonight we have Nastia with us from the American Red Cross. She's going to be the one who's going to be giving us all the explanations and teaching us what we should be doing to be better prepared throughout the times when we have these potential bad weather events. I'm also joined by Representative Mitch Bolinsky from Newtown. I didn't introduce myself, Mitch. I'm Tony Scott. I'm representative from the 112th District in Monroe, but I also represent a little bit of Newtown with you there in Newtown. But I also want to say hi and thank you for coming in and co-hosting with me today. So we're going to open it up here for a little bit. Mitch is going to talk to us a little bit about understanding how we can ask any questions. If you have any concerns throughout the event today, he's going to be able to help us a little bit. So Mitch, why don't you tell everyone who's watching today how they can help if they have any questions or any concerns that they can reach out to us while this event is going live.
Thank you, Representative Scott. Hello, Newtown and Monroe. I'm Representative Mitch Bolinsky. Want to start by thanking my colleagues and to the Red Cross for this preparedness program. Very important, and it's not just a wintertime thing. In Newtown, we remember well some of the things that have happened over the years. We had Tropical Storm Irene, which brought all kinds of destruction in 2011. Newtown had a very unique storm in 2018. The Weather Service called it straight line winds, but it cut a tornado-like path of destruction through Brookfield and through the northern part of Newtown that you can still see today. It was just awesome and caused a lot of damage and a lot of power outages. So, and then of course, in our very, very near past, Storm Isaias took a pretty good toll, and lots of us were without power for as much as 8 days. So looking forward to hearing how we can be better prepared. And then for our participants, just want to remind you that you can address your questions to us in the chat room or in the chat box function, or in the reactions function. If you pull that menu down, you'll have the opportunity to raise your hand and then get called on, right there, and your question will be presented live. I will let you know that once the presentation starts, the questions will be held to the end, but everyone will be answered. So I'm going to turn it on over to Nastia, and thank you very much for being here, everybody.
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you for having me on. As folks have mentioned, my name is Nastia Karpukhina. I'm the Regional Manager for Preparedness for Connecticut and Rhode Island, and I'm very excited to be here with you all and talk about some of my favorite things, which is preparedness. Hence, it's in my name and in the title, right? So when we talk about Be Red Cross Ready, and what you see in the screen here is really, we're going to talk about essentials. So no matter what disaster or natural hazard you're experiencing, it's important to be prepared and to have a base where you start from, which is what we'll talk about today. Now, the fact is, disasters, they happen anywhere, right? They can happen at any time. They happen often. And a lot of times they happen with little or no warning. And I think the straight line winds are a great example of what can happen because of the storm, right? Every year, communities across the United States, they experience, of course, hurricanes and tornadoes and winter storms. We have wildfires that burn thousands of acres in California and, of course, across the United States for us. And I would say something that we don't think about often, but is very much and can happen anywhere, are home fires, right? While it's not a big disaster, it is very much an emergency for those individuals that are affected. And that recovery can take a lot of time. So for us, which hazards do we face? Well, I would say a lot of folks wouldn't say that we're a hurricane prone state, but we actually are. We do and can get hurricanes, and I think straight line winds were an example. Home fires, as I mentioned, can happen anywhere. We can get flooding as a result of hurricanes or in general results of storms. Tornadoes are actually brought over through hurricanes, so they can certainly occur as well. And we know we're no strangers to extreme, I would say winter for sure, but even in the summer months, it's now becoming extreme heat, right? So why do I tell you about all of these emergencies? Well, one, it really depends. Depending on the kind of hazard that we have is how you should be prepared, right? You would not do the same things for a home fire that you would do for a hurricane, right? For a home fire, you need to leave your home. For a hurricane, depending on where you are, it would not be a safe thing to do. So it's important that we know what's happening around us so we are prepared. So I think this is a great way to start because it is general preparedness and some great tips. So some things that we really should be prepared in any disaster, and especially in the ones that we've talked about and the assumption. So I want to address an assumption. A lot of folks think that there will be someone else that will be there to help them in case of an emergency. However, a lot of times resources just are not there to support everyone immediately. First responders, disaster organizations such as the American Red Cross, government agencies, and hospital emergency rooms, they do really their best. That's what they're there for, to help people. But on average, these groups are not staffed for large level emergencies. They're really staffed for day-to-day operations. So the truth is we really do have to depend on ourselves in times of emergencies because roads may be impassable. Emergency rooms may be overcrowded. Our restaurants, they may be closed. So, and along with banks and grocery stores, right? So it's important for us to be able to help ourselves, to also think about the neighbors that we have or anyone with access to functional needs or elderly, and really think about them in times of an emergency as well. We should not count on receiving help right away, but instead we should focus on individual and family and community preparedness, because it really does take everyone to be prepared and to take care of each other. So how can we prepare? Well, for us, once we prepare, would everything be perfect? No, most likely it's not. Will the preparation make things quick and easy? Not always, sometimes, but not always, right? But planning and preparation will help you to be safe and recover quickly, especially if you've thought about recovery and you've planned. So what does it mean to be prepared? Well, for different folks, it means different things, right? We can take protective steps, which is attending and listening to what I'm talking about is one of the steps that you're taking to be prepared. We can adapt to tough challenges. That's a good way, if we're prepared, we can react in the right ways. Because while we may not know what's coming at us, we know that we've taken some actions to take care of ourselves and those that are near and dear to us. And that makes that recovery really a lot faster than if you had no plans. And that comes with, a good example would be renter's insurance. A lot of folks, when we are referring to home fires, if they're renters, they think that the landlord has insurance that also covers their things. However, what they don't realize is that the landlord usually has structural insurance only, and they need the renter's insurance in order to protect their things. That is a great step to becoming prepared, right? To really investing in something that doesn't cost a lot. I would say, on average, it costs $100 to $200 a year for renter's insurance, but that is a great example of how we can do that. Some other ways, which is what we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about today, are to be Red Cross ready. So in order to be Red Cross ready, some of the things that I'm sure you've heard about before, but we'll expand a little more, you need to do 3 things. You need to get a kit, and your kit should contain the supplies that you and everyone in your household will need or can carry easily with you to evacuate if needed, right, in case of an emergency. You should also make a plan. Those plans will differ depending on the disaster, right? But it's important to identify the steps and to that you need for those specific disasters. So for each disaster, you decide who in the household will do what, where you will go, and how you will communicate with each other. And it's very important, the communication piece, especially if you're not together in the same household area when an emergency happens. And last but not least is to stay informed. It's important that you know how to receive the information your town is communicating to you, your government agencies are communicating to you, and what's available in your community. This will allow you to quickly respond because you would know what's coming, and to help yourself, your household, of course, and your community. So now we'll take I would say a more specific look into each one of these to get some details. So for our get a kit, I think that's one of the things that people really do think about a lot. And we think about a kit, but a lot of times we don't necessarily take the steps to start building a kit. But if a disaster strikes your community, you may not have access to food, water, electricity, medical facility, or even a drugstore. So that essential kit becomes very important. Preparing a disaster kit for your household is that step to keep everyone safe and healthy during a disaster. So I would even say consider assembling 2 kits. In one kit, you can put everything that you need to stay at home for at least 3 days. And maybe you're able and work to gather supplies enough for a week. So start small, start with the 3 days, and then slowly build out that kit for a week. And then the other kit I would suggest would be a go bag, right? It could be a lightweight, smaller version that's portable that you can take with you in case you do have to evacuate and leave your home quickly. And it should contain everything that you would need to be on your own for 3 days. Of course, no kit would be or should be the same because it is based on the individual needs of folks that are in your household. So it could be a kit for entire home, or it could be a kit per person per household, whatever is easiest. And customizing, as I mentioned, it's very important to meet the needs of everyone in your area and to be prepared for the common disasters in our area. So what does that look like? Well, for us, for us, it's first we start with the essentials, right? And our basics include our water, our food, our first aid supplies, any medical supplies that you use in a continuous, someone in the household uses on a continuous basis and really relies on them and needs them. For the food, it should be non-perishable things. Usually canned goods are good. Important thing about canned goods, if you have those, make sure you have a manual can opener, not an electric one. Because if you don't have electricity, you may not be able to access the food that you have, right? So it's important to think about steps. And how much water do we need? As you can see, it's usually a gallon per person per day. It's about roughly half or more for folks for drinking, and then the rest for our hygiene. But if these are hot months and we don't have electricity, you may want more water because you will be thirsty more, right? You will be hot. So what else? We have our flashlights, we have our batteries. Weather radio is important. I know a lot of the times we now rely on our phones, but if we're not able to charge our phones, or in the times when there was straight winds and the cell towers were affected and we could not communicate with each other, it's important that we're still receiving information one way or another. And national weather radios are a great way to do that. So it's important to know, because myself included, we're all so relied on cell phones that we don't think about what if they're not there, right? So I would approach it with that mindset. A first aid kit is a plus. Personally, I have one in every bag, in every car, because I'm accident prone, but definitely in your essential kit, it's important. Copies of important paperwork and documents, maybe your mortgage, your social security cards, your driver's license. So it's important, especially in the go bag too, if you grab and go, that you also have a backup copy of the things that you need. And that includes medication lists as well. I think that's very important. Sanitation, personal hygiene, multi-use tools, cell phone chargers. And nowadays we even have cell phone charger banks. I think those are great to charge before an emergency. Like we had our winter weather over this weekend, that was a good time to get your power banks out and recharge them just in case you lose that electricity, right? Also, and we do have phones for that, but I don't think folks think about it. Current photos of everyone in your household or your loved ones. And for children, you know, those photos should be updated every 6 months. And that, of course, happens if you're not together and if you're separated. So it's important that you have those things. And last but not least, I know we've gone away from GPSs and we usually use our phone for that, but a map of the area if you're not familiar. So if you have evacuation routes, but the cell towers are down, your phone is down, you should also know how to get out. And if you're being directed to go somewhere, how to get there, right? Is that a big list? Yes, I know. Don't be overwhelmed. I know it's a lot of information, but the important thing is taking small steps at a time. So maybe you start small and add 1 to 3 items every week. And as you build your kit, you know, and you gather the supplies that you need, it will grow. So you don't have to rush to the store and buy everything at once. A lot of it are household items, and some of them you cannot necessarily put in a kit right away. So if you have a manual can opener and you need it for canned goods, I would not suggest putting that in a bag because you may not have your black beans for dinner, okay? But no matter what is in your kit, and there are many, many other things that you can put in there, it's important that everything works when disaster strikes. So make sure that your water has not expired. Yes, water bottles do expire. Make sure your batteries have not expired, and that your first aid kit supplies are fresh and not expired as well. I've hinted on it and talked about it about several times, but customization is very important, and it really depends on everyone who's in your home, right? So it can also vary depending on what area you're in as well. Depending on your customized kit. For example, you know, if you have someone in your home who is deaf or hard of hearing, a weather radio that has flashing actual text that tells folks that there's an emergency is a good investment, right? Because they will not be able to listen to a regular radio. So what are some other things that we can do to customize? Well, medical supplies, if anyone uses syringes, lancets, any diabetic or insulin medication, oxygen medication, it's important to have backups if possible. Definitely have the supplier information. And it's a good idea to reach out to your suppliers, whether it be doctors, whether it be oxygen suppliers, and ask them what their emergency plans are in case there's a disruption. Because if this is something that you're relying on, it's important to have the information, if not the backup supply, right? Any assistive or adaptive equipment, communication boards, baby supplies if you have children, if you have any pets or any emotional support or any service animals, it's important that you have the items for them as well, because they are part of our family, right? And so it's important that they have their water, their food, and whatever supplies they need. But as you see, this list is not an all exhaustive. This is just some ideas and thoughts about what we can bring. As you see on the screen, there are some fun items as well, because depending on where you are or if you're going somewhere, it's important that we have the essentials that are customized. But what about your mind, or what about your children? So for your children, if you have to evacuate and there's an emergency, it's a scary time. And if they see grown-ups scared, they're going to be scared too. So if they have their baby blankets, their comfort animals, stuffed animals, any puzzles, anything that really to get folks going, if you don't have any lights, entertainment as well. Okay. I know it's a long list, but I promise you all the information that I talk about, one, it's available on redcross.org, which I will share afterwards. And two, you don't have to do it all at once, okay? And one final plug I would say for kits is if you work somewhere that is not a home. So I've recently converted to work from home a lot in our current times, but it's important that you have or think about some of the items that you may need depending on where you are. So of course, I advise that you have a kit for vehicles, especially during extreme winter or extreme heat, that you have the first aid supplies, that you have appropriate clothing or warm clothing if you need to change flares, jumper cables, etc. As well as for work. If you're at work and you have to evacuate, and it's important that you have sensible shoes, walking shoes, food and water, and it's an easy grab and go. Just simple things, and you may already have that. I always have a change of clothes in the car, and I change it out depending on the weather, because you really never know, right? And that's really a part of the preparedness. When something happens, a lot of times it happens with little or no warning. So it's good to be prepared. There's that motto. So let's transition to make a plan. A lot of things I would say go into making a plan, and of course it's really dependent on an emergency. So we've talked about the likely hazards that we have in our area, and those different hazards require different action plans, right? As I mentioned, during a tornado, you're not going to run out to the nearest tree like you would in a home fire, or to your meeting spot. So it's important to know what to do. And part of that is talking with everyone in your household about how to prepare for and response to those hazards that we have, where we live, of course, where we work, where we play, and where we study. So it's not just for our household, right? What happens if we're at work, our children are at school, our grandmother is shopping, and we cannot return home? So those are great conversations to have, because it's important to have that plan. You should identify responsibilities for each member of the household and plan to work together as a team. If a household member is in military, or maybe they travel a lot for work, it's also important to plan what you would do without that household member. And the reason why I say that, so for example, if you have small children or someone who has access to functional needs or elderly that may need assistance to evacuate during a home fire, you cannot rely on someone who is going to be gone possibly right during that emergency. You should plan with them, and you should plan without them. Now, individuals with access and functional needs, I brought it up, need some additional help and additional preparation. I would say a bit different as well, right? It's important that folks have a personal support network. And if they don't, that they create one. And that's a personal support network is really there to provide assistance if a disaster happens. And it shouldn't be just one person in your support network. It should be at least 3, because you never know what folks are doing, right? Or where they are. So it's important to have a functional assessment that you can complete with your personal support network, because you want to identify what needs you would have during and after an emergency. So that's very important. And we talk about making plans for households and households with access to functional needs. No matter what household you're in, you should practice that. If you have a personal support network, you should practice your plans with them. And that includes, for example, home fire escape plan. We advise that folks make a plan and practice it at least twice a year. So if you make your home fire escape plan, but your personal support network does not know they're part of the network or have not practiced, they will not know what to do, simply, right? So communication in this key is key. And of course, don't forget to think about your pets. Don't forget to think about your service animals. While service animals are allowed in Red Cross shelters, for example, if we open them, a lot of times pets cannot, right? There may be a different section where they're housed, but there may be not. It depends on the emergency. So it's important that you know where your pet can go, or you have pre-identified hotels, friends, relatives, whatever they may be, that you can go and stay, for example, if there's a home fire emergency, and then broader scale, if there is a wider emergency, what the plan would be, okay? So once we have talked about our plan, there are some key things that we need to identify, especially when it comes to, I allude and refer to it quite a lot, right? The home fire, what happens if there's a home fire? Well, there should be, in a home fire, as well as your larger plans, you should identify 2 ways to evacuate from your home, from your neighborhood, and from your town, depending on the scale of an emergency. And you should know what to do in case a disaster strikes. So you have 2 ways out of your home, out of your neighborhood, out of your town. Do you have a place to meet? For home fires, it should be a place in front of your home, not behind your home, that's far enough away, that's safe, so everyone in your household knows where to meet. But for a wider emergency, or if you're separated, you should have a place outside of your neighborhood where you could plan to meet. And I would say, don't forget any transportation challenges. So if you know folks that cannot drive, whether it be folks in your household or maybe your neighbors, it's important to have those conversations so everyone is taken care of, right? So determine ahead of time who has the responsibilities, where you're going to go, and review those plans so folks are aware. All right. Now, once you have all your plans, the writing in bold blue at the bottom is very important. Practice, practice, practice. It really does. It doesn't make it perfect, but it does build muscle memory. And that muscle memory is important, especially, for example, in home fires, because your body knows what to do because you have covered this. So you are not looking for folks because you did not communicate ahead of time. You know that everyone in your household knows where to go in time of an emergency and what to do. And that includes the personal support network as well. And last but not least, of course, we have stay informed. Now, we talked a little bit about being informed, and because it's important to know what hazards we have in the area and how we should prepare for it. But there is a little more to it. It is not just a one and done, it is an ongoing process. So some of the things that you should do is know how your community warns you in case of a disaster. For example, I live in Danbury, Connecticut. I'm subscribed to the emergency communications, so I know when there's a level 3 snow emergency, and I know what's happening and what the city is doing about it. Investing in a weather radio, as I have mentioned, is a good way to stay informed. And there are, as you see the phone, we do have Red Cross apps that are free that track over 20 disasters, actually, and you're able to put in information not just for where you live, but for your loved ones as well. So for example, my mother lives in Kentucky. I know when something is coming, so I can call her to make sure that she knows and she's prepared and to check in on her. So there's the emergency app, there's a first aid app as well, and there's a variety of things that you can access to help you be more prepared. And I think a key thing also when we talk about emergencies and what's coming our way is that we understand and know the difference between a watch and a warning, right? So a watch means that there's a potential for a specific hazard in our area. So you should start making preparations. You should monitor the alerts and the weather and ready to take action if needed. A warning means a specific type of emergency is imminent or already in our area, so we should be taking steps depending on what kind of emergency it is. So it's important that we know what those mean because those are used for various emergencies. If you're traveling or you travel a lot for work, it's always good to know your exits. It's always good to know the area in case you have to evacuate, right? And what disasters or emergencies are. For example, if you're traveling to California in the summer or during almost any months at this point, but depending on where you are, there may be wildfires. So it's really important to know what emergencies you may be facing depending on where you're going and be prepared for that. And I would say really underrated now, but very important is to get to know your neighbors. A lot of times they may have critical communication that you do not know about. It's a good way to watch out for each other, to communicate, and really make those plans. So I know it was a lot of information in a relatively short amount of time, but I want you to focus on 3 things. And a lot of the information that I covered, the rest of it really can be accessed via redcross.org for preparedness and other avenues. But make sure that you have a household disaster plan and you practice using it. And I can't stress that enough, especially for home fire readiness. It's really the type of emergency that folks do not think is going to happen to them until it happens. So it's important that you take care of everyone in your home, that you have or are working on building a disaster preparedness kit. And maybe once you have the one kit, you're expanding to your vehicle, you're expanding to a go bag, etc. And I would say at least one member of your household is trained in CPR and first aid. It is very important, and I would say also underrated, because in times of emergencies, it is wonderful if someone knows how to take care of folks and perform life-saving, right, skills until the EMTs get there. And outside of that, I just want to thank you for taking the time to attend. And I look forward to any questions there may have been during the presentation, and we can certainly go back. And I'll stop sharing the screen so we could see everyone. Are there any questions that you have seen?
Nastia, I'll ask a quick question, or at least talk about a piece of information I know you have, is about apps that Red Cross has that you can talk about, people can download and be able to access information and tips and stuff that you have. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Certainly. So, and I'm looking for my phone as well to show. All of our apps are available on Android and Apple devices. They're all free of charge, and they really are available for folks whenever you want. There's if anyone donates blood, there's a blood donor app as well, where you can sign up for blood drives and figure out which one is nearest to you. It also tracks your progress. But I would say the important thing with the emergency app, and you will maybe, it's very, apologize, it's hard to see. Nope, it's too bright. It's too bright. The emergency app has an exclamation mark, and it looks kind of, the reason why you see two different things, because it tracks two different places. So it tracks my location, and it's tracking 12 different hazards. You can uncheck the ones that are not in your area. So for example, my Danbury, Connecticut location does not track tsunamis, because the likelihood of that, if that happens, then I don't know what to tell anybody. But so you can customize what you track, you can customize the address. It gives you the watches, it gives you the warnings, and the information that you can communicate with your loved ones. The first aid app actually has a video, I believe, on how to do compressions, on how to bandage a cut. Those are all really helpful and free resources that are available to folks. And I do have all of those on my phone as well. It's just too bright to show you, unfortunately.
Great.
And I can share that information as well. I can certainly leave a fact sheet that we can probably attach, so folks are able to access the information.
Great. I think they're in the chat too. So I think we just posted in the chat if people want to see redcross.org how to get to those apps. That's great.
Wonderful.
I have a quick question. When it comes to home fires, that's something that nobody seems to ever be ready for, but are there certain times of the year where home fires are more common than others?
That is a wonderful lead-in question. Yes, the answer is yes. While home fires happen all year round, they do increase during the fall and winter months. And a lot of times that really depends. So the number one cause of fires are actually kitchen fires and cooking fires. But depending on folks and what they use, whether they're using an electrical heater, a portable heater that is too close to something that can catch on fire, whether or not they have too many things plugged into the wall. But a lot of times folks also keep warm using their kitchen. So it's important, if anything, folks are cooking, and I know I used to do this before I started with the Red Cross, is to leave food unattended when it's cooking. So it's important not to do that. That is the number one reason and the most preventable, I would say, reason of home fires.
Thank you very much. You know, I've interesting thing with the kit is such an important element, and having it at the ready and being seasonally different is incredibly important. The first time I ever had an experience where I got stranded, stuck someplace, I was on my way back from home to college, And when I left home, it was sunny. And then I came around the horn of Lake Michigan into Michigan on Interstate 94, and there was one of the famous lake effect blizzards, and I actually spent the night on I-94 stuck. And I'll be darned, but I always thought my father was a goofball, but he had a kit in that car that had a couple of blankets in it. The unscented type candles if you needed light. And this is back in the days when there was no such thing as bottled water either. Water came from faucet. But that crazy man, he had thermoses with water in them in the backseat of my car. I mean, heck, it wasn't a good experience, but I didn't have to get out of my car and do anything stupid in that blizzard. And so my dad was like, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 years ahead of me on that, which is pretty cool.
The fact that he had water in a thermos, it just means that he was well ahead of his time.
Yeah, he was. So I think there's a chat for those that are listening. We just put up in the chat a link to get to the Red Cross's Android and Apple apps. So I know I'm going to be clicking on that one so that I can put it onto my phone, because I have every weather channel in the world and I'm never happy with the warnings I get. And I frankly, I don't care about the tsunami warnings in Seattle as much as I do about what's coming down the hill toward us from, from Bethel.
Yeah. Now, I have a question for you. Like, in terms of documents, right? I have like a tiny little safe that I have some of my documents in, passport, birth certificate, stuff like that. What's the idea with that when you need to leave? If the house is on fire, like how do you choose what to grab and how easy to grab those kind of important documents? What's the best thing that Red Cross thinks is, how do you handle that?
So first and foremost, I think that's a great question. And something that, I could advise would definitely have copies. You can always have them in a safe, whether it be in a relative's residence. I mean, it's important to have backup, right? And nowadays, we don't necessarily need paper copies. We can make digital ones as long as they're safe and secure in the cloud. If you have a box, I hope it's a firebox. And the reason why I say that is it can take as little as 2 minutes. You may have 2 minutes or less to get out of a home if there's a home fire. So I don't want you to look for anything except unless it's alive and you already have a plan, right? So if you're the one who's responsible for grabbing your child or grabbing your pet, then that is what you do. You grab and you go. You do not have time to look around. And that's really what it comes down to.
Gotcha.
So I mean, when we're dealing with, it seems like we have a couple of natural disasters pretty much every year. Assuming that we've done our due diligence and we're ready, what do we need to think about, once we get things stabilized, if we're going to be involved in a something where we're going to have a prolonged period of inconvenience, or maybe that we're hurt. So what?
I think I understand. So it really depends on, I would say, and I think these are great conversational topics with your household, but it depends on the weather. It depends on the kind of emergency of what actions that we really take. If the power is out now and, we are in the 20s and in the teens, a lot of times it's not necessarily a safe bet for you to hunker down at home if you have no heat, right? So it's important to reach out. And that's why I say it's important to know what your community and what your officials are doing and what's available. If something that is so prolonged, then, chances are there may be shelters, there will certainly be warming centers. And a lot of times you should know whether or not this affects your particular household, right? Working with Eversource and depending on your heat, or if it is a citywide emergency, because the actions would be different. If it's citywide, then chances are Eversource and utility companies are really working hard. There most likely will be shelters. And I would say you should be calling folks that live outside of the emergency area, which is why I say you should have those plans for in town, outside of town, and utilizing your support network, your contacts, and maybe even the list of hotels that you have to see what's available. If you're hurt, first things first, right? Assessing how hurt that individual is and what the needs are. A lot of times the first aid CPR class is a good start to that, because you know whether or not it's critical that needs attention right now, or if it's something that just needs a bandage, right? So really, and I do not like and do not want to be vague, but it is very important to talk about different emergencies, because those actions and protective actions are different.
Yeah, one of the things that I have taken to doing, I cared for elderly parents for many years. So I try to encourage folks to always check on their neighbors and to check on anybody they know that is, infirmed or, just wouldn't be able to deal with the loss of power or windstorm that could take off their roof and things like that. So checking on the neighbors. But one of the things that is really like a local emergency right now in Connecticut, I think it's nationwide actually, there's a huge blood shortage. My wife runs a blood bank at a major hospital in a city nearby here. And they're literally saying no to some requests for blood. And there are people that want to come over, come through the window and grab my wife by the neck, and because they want blood for their patients. These doctors and nurses are frustrated. Whenever there's a disaster, or in this case, a pandemic, people got to remember that life goes on for the rest of the world, and there's always a need for blood. So, not that I am here to self-promote, but in 2021, I passed a bill allowing 16-year-olds with parental consent to contribute to blood drives, and we still don't have the traffic necessary to keep the Red Cross supplied in blood. So, anything that we can do that's a little bit more global is important. Remember, the needs are sometimes extend way beyond your own community.
Yeah. And Mitch, to kind of piggyback on that with a 16-year-old blood drive, I have teenage daughters who are 13 years old. They're twins. So Nastia, thinking about like CPR and where they can do, they're gonna start thinking about babysitting soon, and like, what's a good age for them to kind of get involved with that? 16 for blood is now, giving blood is good. What's that age? What's that sweet spot for them to kind of get involved with learning CPR and understanding that?
That's actually a good question. And I would have to get back to you. I do not know if there is an age restriction. I know that mostly I've seen adults that are taking it for various reasons, right? But that's not to say that there is or what the cutoff is. So I can certainly get back to you. I do think that what you touched on is a great step, and that's the babysitting courses that are offered with the Red Cross. I think they're very much at the age to start looking at that. And that's a great start towards safety, right?
Good.
Isn't it the Red Cross that certifies lifeguards? Our daughter was a lifeguard at the YMCA for a lot of years. And I know that she I mean, she was trained in life-saving at the, certainly by the age of 13. And I don't remember the specifics of whether or not they required CPR training, but she got that as well at some point. So really good question, Tony.
Yeah. Great. Well, do we have any other additional questions here while we have Nastia here on the line? We'll give one more minute for any other questions. One last thing I have for you, Nastia, from my end is, one thing I have, I recently bought a house just a couple of years ago, but I was at my previous house for about 6 years, right? And I was prepared. I had my fire extinguisher in my kitchen, and I went by my dryer, because that's another space that I heard there's always, potential fires, right? So, but then when I was leaving, I realized they did not work anymore, right? They're past their expiration date. So something I made a mental note of is every 3 years to switch it out. So what I want to do is, even if they go for 5 years, I want to have it, because my girls have never sprayed a fire extinguisher, right? They've never actually done it. And under pressure, it gets really crazy, right? So the fact that they understand how to do it, they can pull the plug, the pin, and do it's really important. I want to do so. We bought one, and we've been in this house for 3 years, and we just recently did that where we pulled the plug and had them do some shoot it, just to understand like what it felt like, right? So they know where to shoot it at, how to put out a fire potentially. So something I just want to make a mention of, because I know luckily I never had the fire, but I did have the instance where extinguisher wasn't working anymore, didn't have any juice anymore to spit it out. So something I think we should be noted, make sure they're always checking the expiration dates on those.
And the same actually goes for smoke alarms. Just for a quick mention, the smoke alarms themselves, you may press it to test it. You're every 6 months and you hear the beep, but right around the 10 mark for some of them, depending on what they are, 5 to 10 years, the sensor that actually detects that heat and that smoke actually dulls. So it's not doing its job as properly as it should. So if the smoke detector is more yellow than the walls, the chances are it's over 10 years old and it should probably be replaced. So it's important to check the date on your smoke alarms, check the date on your fire extinguishers. If you have a fire ladder, make sure that everyone in your home knows how to use that safely. And that should be part of the planning process. So you bring up a good point. That's absolutely correct.
Great.
Probably time to start wrapping.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to begin by thanking, thanking the Red Cross and Nastia for a really good presentation. I also want to remind the folks that are out there listening that this has been recorded. It's on Facebook Live, and at some point in the not too distant future, I think Representative Scott and I will probably post the videos so that anybody that that might be interested in how to make a plan and how to execute it, you can give them a link and let them click in.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nastia. Appreciate your help supporting this. I think it's much appreciated. It might not be helpful to today, but it's going to help at some point down the road, and that's what the preparation is all about. So I appreciate you thinking ahead for us and give us those ideas. Really do.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was absolutely a pleasure. And like you said, when that resource is out there, it's available for folks to explore. So it's important to have that in the back burner. Maybe it's too much information now, but that doesn't mean that once you're ready, you can take a breath, sit down, and really start working and making yourself and your household and thereby your community safer.
Great. Thanks, Nastia. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Mitch, for joining me here today. This is great.